Thank you, everyone. It is a pleasure to be back at B&H. I was here a few months ago, and I want to thank Canon from the get-go, because seriously, without Canon support, getting from the left coast to New York several times a year to speak here just would not happen. So that said, I also want to let you know Canon has just launched a new online learning program. And so I had the good fortune last October to work with Canon on a course called Getting Started with Flash Photography. So this is a subscription service. They have a wide range of topics, not only just on flash photography, but on general shooting ideas. So if I can remember, and I have my backup man in the back, so that URL is shop.usa.canon.com. Is that right? shop.usa.canon.com will get you to this. So if you're interested in Canon-centric, Canon-produced online learning resources, it's brand new. It launched maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. So if you're thinking, well, I have not heard about that, that's because it's brand new. Couple of other things. Many people, although we're here to talk about lighting and flash photography and radio speed lighting specifically, many photographers have issues understanding or need reminders about the mechanics of exposure. How does aperture and ISO and shutter speed relate to each other? And frankly, how do they relate to flash photography? So I created this little PDF guide called the Exposure Quick Guide. You can go to my blog, pixelated.com, Pixylated, pixelated.com, and there's a little button on the right-hand menu bar, and just go and download that PDF. It's free. It's about 8 pages. And it really is designed to be a simple field guide, all right? And the reality is we somehow think flash is separate from aperture and shutter and ISO, when in fact it really is the fourth leg on that 3-legged tripod. If you're shooting flash, you need to think about, as you develop your skills, how your flash power selection integrates with things like aperture and shutter and ISO. I'm also very proud to say that last fall, the second edition of the Speedliter's Handbook was produced. So if you're the kind of person who needs a handy, although somewhat heavy because it is 450 pages, guide that has the buttons and dial steps for almost every model, current model of Canon Speedlite on a wide range of techniques, take a look at Speedliter's Handbook. If you go to Pixelated, you'll find an excerpt. You can download the first chapter for free. And if you have the book and you liked it especially, I'd be really grateful if you'd go out to your favorite online or bricks and mortar bookseller and write a review, because truly it's a grassroots effort to get the word out about these books. And frankly, the way that online retailers work, the more people who write reviews, the more likely they are to show it to the next person who comes along and searches on a similar topic. So I'm grateful if you've written a review, and if you haven't, I'm grateful in advance for taking a few minutes. Now, switching things up. Normally I talk a lot about technique on the front end in terms of the buttons and dials and that sort of thing. And this time we're starting with a detailed kind of behind the scenes look of several shoots that I've done with Canon's radio speedlights. And I have to say, as a civilian, as a non-Canon employee, I was really fortunate. I was one of the first people in 2012 that Canon contacted and said, hey, if you'll sign this secret, you won't tell anybody document, we'll send you some of these brand new units, but we can't tell you anything about them until you sign the document. And I had the opportunity for about 6 weeks before the worldwide announcement that radio control was incorporated in the Speedlites to use the new system. Then it was limited to the 600EX-RT and the STE3RT transmitter. But here are a number of shoots that I've done. So Cowboy in the Spotlight, this was done actually up at the Montana Workshop a couple summers ago. And we're going to keep coming back to this idea, but it's important to think about the ambient light, the natural light. And I have nothing against natural light. I'm grateful that there's natural light. But if I'm trying to guide the viewer's eye in a shot, I will often use my shutter speed to dial down the ambient light. So actually I'm underexposing the normal shot, and then I'm coming in with my speed light and isolating my subject, in this case spotlighting his face, although that window light that's right there along the back of his neck, that's still natural light that creates that all-important edge that separates him from that darkened background. Here's a set shot, and you can see the speed light in the upper right-hand corner. I'm not talking too much today about modifiers. I'm happy to answer questions at the end about specific modifiers. And if you go to the B&H channel and just put my name in, you'll find quite a number of presentations where I go deep into what my favorite modifiers are. In this particular case, I used a honeycomb grid, and basically that turns the rectangular shape of the flash into a circle. It gives it that spotlight effect. And so I was able to light that fellow's face right on without letting the light fall far down his chest. And again, by using a little bit faster shutter speed, I was able to underexpose that background. So, there, you came in late, so we'll excuse you. Everybody else turned their phone off. And I'm glad you're right up here in the front. All right, so another idea, how do we shoot the look of white seamless if we only have one speed light? Because in a studio setting, a photographer will set up one or two or more lights to light a background, and then set up additional lights to light the subject. And here's a really convenient shot. So this technique that I'm showing you was done with one speed light and a triangular reflector. Now, the key to this is to put the speed light off to the side. In this case, it's on a stand, and I have a workshop participant holding that diffuser. And so the light is actually aimed mostly at the background, a white wall, but the edge of the light happens to be hitting the diffuser. So that one speed light is doing two jobs. But the great thing about radio speed lighting is I can control every aspect of that flash literally from the back of my Canon camera. I don't have to run over there and say, oh, I want to change the power setting. I want to change the mode. The only thing I would have to go over there to do, which I did when I set it up, was manually set the zoom. All right? But if I felt that I needed a wider or narrower beam, then I walk back over. But in terms of taking a test shot, looking at the light, looking at the shadow, looking at the histogram to evaluate the exposure, and then say, oh, I need more light, I need less light, all of that gets dialed in from the camera. So this is a very natural thing to do in terms of maintaining a conversation with the subject. So this was shot on my hometown beach, Morro Bay, California. I live in Morro Bay, halfway between Los Angeles and San Francisco. And before you envy me too much, know that that water out beyond the sand spit is about 50 degrees year-round. It's cold. It's not like that idyllic Southern California water they get from Santa Barbara south. So this was a senior portrait I did. This was a kid that I knew through Boy Scouts for years. He was an Eagle Scout, and when he called me and said, Mr. Arena, would you shoot my senior portrait for the yearbook? I said, of course, Alex, I'll be glad to. What do you want to do? And he says, I want to go down to the beach. And at that time, I lived in another community that was 30 miles away. And he said, I want to play my saxophone to the setting sun. That's what I want in the yearbook. I was like, okay, no problem. Except between his crazy super kid schedule and my travel and teaching schedule, there was like one day before the yearbook deadline when he and I could meet. So we get in the car, we drive down the beach, and voila, we will not have a sunset that night because there's low clouds all the way out well beyond the horizon. But the great news, being a speedliter rather than a natural light shooter, is I don't have to worry about that. And we got a shot, in fact, we got a whole bunch of shots that he loved. And to this day, I'm a hero with his mom, which never hurts. So how did I do this shot? And again, radio speed lighting completely made the difference. So I have a speed light on the left. Key light means it's the main light. And I have a piece of amber colored gel. It's called CTO, color temperature orange gel. That amber colored gel is taped to the front of the Speedlite. And why is that Speedlite not in a softbox? Because I'm trying to emulate the look of a setting sun. A setting sun is a direct light source. It creates hard shadows. So to make it believable, I have to change the color to amber, or California sunset color, and I have to continue to create hard shadows. There are no hard shadows when the clouds go to the horizon. Now, the softbox on the left, that's an Apollo softbox, so Westcott, that's the company, Apollo is the line. And I love these softboxes for speed lighting because they're quick to set up. They work just like a photographic umbrella, except the difference is they have a zipper on the side. You literally mount it through the side of the softbox, put the Speedlite inside, facing to the back, and now I've got hard directional light coming in as if it was a setting sun, and I've got softer fill light so that there's not too much contrast. Let's go back and look at that shot. And so we worked literally until it was almost too dark to see. And the radio speed lighting, and I had a 5D Mark III and the new 600E XRT, and that autofocus system was brilliant, I was truly stunned because we were so focused. I probably made 250 or 300 frames, horizontals, verticals, in close, medium, out far. He hit a song that I really liked and I made him play it over and over and over. So we, lots of options. But I couldn't have done this shot on that day without Speedlites, without the ability to control them, because again, there's probably 30 feet between those two stands, and we're on a tidal mud flat as it happened. So to have to run back and forth and make a power adjustment, it would have killed the efficiency of the shoot. But again, I was able to dial in everything other than zoom from the back of my camera, and the master transmitter on my camera communicated those instructions by radio out to those two units. All right, so here's my son Tony, who I'm very proud to say will be a freshman at Boston College in the fall. Just came down from Boston this morning, and Tony's played soccer for years and years and years. So oftentimes we're outdoors, full sun, and we think, oh, this is not a good time to make a photograph. Why? Because somebody taught you years ago to put the sun behind your back, and while that makes it easy for you to see, it makes your subject squint. So one thing that's very simple to do if you have a Speedlite is to actually put the sun to your subject's back. And what happens is, you can see in the frame on the left, the sun will create a very nice hair light and shoulder light. So those high, brighter tones, those highlights and brighter tones are serving to separate Tony from the darker tones of the grass behind him. But of course, as you can see on the left, his face is completely underexposed. So left side of this shot, 100% natural light. So what did I do? There we go, there's the natural light shot. I came in with 3 Speedlites. And as much as I know about speed lighting, when people say, well, what do you really carry? If I'm packing for bear, I'm going to carry 3 Speedlites in my kit. All right? And this is a very simple setup in that I've got 2 Speedlites behind Tony aimed at his face. Now notice in the diagram, you see next to each of the blue Speedlights there's a little black line. So that black line is there to indicate that I flagged the Speedlite. While having light come and sculpt his face is really important, what I want to avoid is that flash coming straight into the lens of the camera. So in this case, I used Rogue flash benders. You could literally, if you don't have those, one of my favorite Speedlite modifiers, the Rogue flash bender, you could literally use an index card taped to the side of your Speedlite or a friend's hand. Whatever it takes to block that flash from the lens, but allow it to hit your subject. And then in this case, the red Speedlite mounted in the hot shoe was controlling, that was the master, it was controlling the 2 blue Speedlights which were slaved. But the on-camera flash was critical in this shot because that's what's putting the light, the gentle light, onto Tony's face. So getting the sculpting light, the hatchet light from the sides, pretty easy. But getting that light dialed in so that it looks relatively natural. My goal is to come out of a situation like this with a shot where nobody thinks, oh, that was obviously lit by flash, right? I want to try to blend this flash in to create what we think we're seeing with our human vision that we really aren't if we were to take that instantaneous. We're scanners. We assemble lots of perceptions, and this is what we think we see. But in fact, what we see is the underexposed face, the side lights, and so on. All right. Radio, again, saved me the hassle. I've done this particular shoot with Tony through a number of years of his soccer career. And it's really convenient. It's just me and him on the soccer field and 2 light stands and the master in the hot shoe. So there's the comparison between the 2 shots. If you shoot youth soccer or youth sports of any kind, that 3-light setup is a complete moneymaker, all right? Or it just makes you the favorite parent on the team if you're giving your shots away. Clamshell lighting, all right? Clamshell lighting is a beautiful technique. You need 2 flashes and a softbox and a diffuser, softbox and a reflector, or 2 softboxes to do it. The reason that it's called clamshell lighting is we have a soft light source up above, a soft light source or a reflector down below. Having a reflector doesn't give us as much control, all right? And the camera literally is positioned between those 2 modifiers. So here's our set shot. So up above, I have the Westcott Apollo Orb, all right? It's 42 inches in diameter. It's on a C-stand. Speedlight is on the inside, aimed backwards because, again, the inside of an Apollo softbox is silver. It's a foil-type fabric. And then down below, I have the standard Apollo. And you can see the tripod off to the left side of that frame, and I literally just unclamped my camera to take this set shot. And by the way, I always take set shots. I don't do this just because I teach. I take set shots so that 6 months from now, when I've gone beyond the infinity sign of my memory, and it's like, how did I light this one again? Was that the whoa, 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 whoa? And whether you take set shots with your cell phone or your camera, the advantage if you do it with your camera is you can fire the lights so you'll remember what they were covering, all right? So clamshell lighting, there on the left is the top light. Not a bad photo, but not a great photo. And on the right is a bad photo, okay? Bottom light, that horror kind of light. Anytime we have uplighting without a commensurate amount of downlighting, we have and sending the shadows upward, we know that's wrong somehow psychologically. But you put those 2 top lights and bottom lights together and you get that beautiful shot. We're going to talk about group mode in a little bit. This is one of the modes that is new or was new in 2012 when the radio systems were first introduced. And group mode enables us to turn off specific speed lights during the shoot. So again, I was able to, just to jump backwards, put the speed light in each of those Westcott Apollos, zip them up, and then control all their features, including effectively turning them on and off. So when I wanted to go forward and say, I want the shot with just the top light, I turned off the B group, which happened to be the bottom light's assignment. Then when I wanted to shoot just the bottom, I reactivated the B group and turned off the A group. And I can do that in about 5 seconds. First time it takes you a while to get used to the menu, but you do it a couple hundred times, and you can do it almost without thinking on the back of the camera. So there's an example. I love clamshell lighting. Again, 2 speed lights and a way to fire them. 2 radio speed lights in this case. All right, here's another senior portrait. This gentleman also, like Alex, was an Eagle Scout. This is Jacob Wright, and longtime friend of our families. And when an Eagle Scout, I'm a total sucker. So if you're an Eagle Scout and you want a senior portrait, I'll do it. And those are the only senior portraits. Either have to be my son, of which I have 3, or you've got to be an Eagle Scout, because otherwise I don't do senior portraits. So Jacob, he got to pick his place. This is his hometown, Paso Robles, California. Inland, beautiful, dry, late fall day, and for whatever reason, don't ask, don't tell, there's this table out in the middle of this old orchard, and chairs around it. How he knew about it, I know not. But he's like, I want to stand here and have my picture made. Okay, easy. So if you think about the picture I just shared with you of Tony, where I put the sun behind him to get that little bit of hair light, a little bit of separation light on the shoulders, and he was underexposed. All right, it's exactly the same thing I did. In fact, if you say, well, where do you put the Speedlite? Well, if the sun's coming in from over there and hitting my subject, then I'm going to put the Speedlite exactly opposite. I try not to have both of them on the same side. Okay, so anytime you can aim two lights at each other, put your subject in the middle, you can have interesting light and shadows. That's one of my go-to setups. So here you go. You can see that's the effect with the flash, and that's the effect of just having natural light. So this is fill flash. This is fill flash. All right. We're going to come back to some more how-to, but I want to now get into some nuts and bolts. And again, if you've got questions about a specific model or a situation, just make a note of it, and at the end we'll get all the questions answered that we have. So, the flagship of the line, 600EX RT, has a successor that is just literally beginning to come to market. It's so new that nobody I know at Canon actually has one yet, but that's not uncommon. So the 600EX RT2, we'll talk a little bit about it, but both of those units, and frankly for the rest of this presentation, when I talk about a 600EX, I'm talking about either one of those two units. They're, for all practical purposes right now, interchangeable. That's a radio-enabled Speedlite. And then the 430EX3 RT, that is also a radio-enabled Speedlite. This Speedlite came to market last fall, 430 series being the mid-range series for Canon. And the 430s have always been able to be used as an optical slave. We'll talk about the difference between optical and radio in a moment. It's always had, that model always had the ability to participate as a worker bee, but it could never before serve as a master, namely a Speedlite that tells other Speedlites what to do. So in the case of the 430 EX3 RT, it can be a radio master, which is very exciting because its price point's incredibly affordable. Now, today we're talking about radio speedlighting. So those are the two units that we're going to focus on, because the 580 series, the 550 series, the 320, the 270, even the little diminutive 90 down there, all of those series are not able to do radio. All right? That doesn't mean they're not able to do wireless. They're able to do optical wireless, all right? So, let's take a quick sidebar. I've got 3 or 4 sidebars stacked in the deck today. The brand new 600EX RT2 has a couple of features that I would call tweaks, that I would say, okay, if you are in a specific shooting situation, you'll think these are really valuable. Those specific upgrades relate to the thermal circuitry in the Speedlite. If you're a power shooter at an event, for instance, and you've got the external battery pack in there and you're firing off full power flashes and you're going and you're going and you're going, with the 580 series Speedlite, it used to be that they would just stop when they had a thermal circuit. Specifically, the 580 EX2 had a thermal circuit, and when it got too hot, it would just stop. And the 600 came along, and they said, we'll put in a graduated thermal circuit that slows the Speedlite down but doesn't stop it completely. So my understanding, I've not held one yet, I've not played with one yet, but my understanding from talking to my friends at Canon is that it has improved thermal circuits, meaning that they can work at a higher temperature for a longer period of time before they gradually extend the recycle time. And it's a two-phase process, because if you're a power shooter and you're going and you're going and you're going and you hit that thermal temp, it's going to slow down the recycle time and slow down the recycle time. And if for whatever reason, and I've actually never had a conversation with anybody who ever experienced this, you kept shooting through that and the unit finally just got too hot, then it would shut down. But I've never met anybody who's gotten to that second phase, all right? So there is a slight upgrade to the menu system, but it's not, and the reason I have faster recycling up at the top of the list and then crossed out, some of the early announcements about this new unit said that it recycles faster than the 600, and I've recently been told by my friends at Canon that in fact it doesn't recycle any faster. What it does is it stays in the game longer. It's not going to shut itself off through that thermal circuit. So what kind of photographer do you have to be to find value in a $570 Speedlite versus a $470 Speedlite? Because there's a $100 difference between the just coming to market model and the one that we've had for the last 4 years. Well, that $100 difference would be of value if you're a power shooter. You already know if you're one of these type of people. You're shooting events, you're shooting weddings, you're going. Not the kind of work I do. When I do location portraits, environmental portraits, I'm not bang, 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 bang. It's like bang, okay, let's change something up. And it's a slow, comfortable pace. All right, onward. It's really important to me that every attendee at my seminars, every student at a workshop who shoots Canon knows that we have this really unique technology that enables us to control our speed lights from the LCD of our camera. Now, I'm a guy who, as you can see right here, carries his reading glasses on the top of his head when I'm not using them because I can't live without them. All right, I used to have a cord, but then they just became crumb catchers. Okay, so I said, let's forego the cord, we'll just park them up top. But controlling your speed light from the back of your camera provides a lot of advantages, particularly with this remote control capability we have with radio. Now, depending on the model year of your camera, what do I mean by that? For instance, the 5D2 was introduced in, gosh, I can't quite put that together. Let's just say 2011, I'm going to guess. Am I close?
A little earlier.
A little earlier? Okay. 2008? 2009? Doesn't matter. I do know that it was before 2012, which was when the 5D Mark III was introduced. Now the 5D Mark III and this 2012 date that you'll hear me talk about, 2012 or newer. It's a distinction because prior to 2012, the menu system on the cameras is text-based. After 2012, or shall I say in the 2012 introduction, starting with the 5D Mark III and every Canon DSLR that's come since then, has a graphically based menu. Now the graphic menu is great because it tells me the state of the entire system. So in the upper left-hand corner, it says that it's in group mode, it's set as a radio master, the zoom is 24 millimeters, it's in first curtain sync, no flash exposure compensation, on and on and on. And because I'm in group mode, I even get this quick view that says Group A, the little box in the lower right-hand corner, is in ETTL mode. Group B is in manual, C is in ETTL, the D light has been turned off, and Group E is in manual. I can see all of that from the back of my camera. That, even without my reading glasses, I can see that. All right? That, to me, is a huge help. Now, I'll be honest, for 5 years, I thought the text-based menu was a gift from the gods. All right? Why? Because I was able to change the mode of my flash on the back of my camera. I didn't have to walk over there, even with optical wireless. All right? This is pre-radio, even with optical wireless. And I could see that change on the back of my camera. So if you have, and I think this is the best of all worlds, and I keep saying this while they're recording me, because I hope Canon will make this change someday. The Canon models that have the touchscreen have touchscreen control for your speedlights. It's like controlling your speedlight with your iPhone. You find the menus thing you want to change, you tap on it, the options pop up in the screen, you tap the option you want, it closes down. There is no faster way to control a speedlight than a touchscreen. I love that. But there's only a handful of mid and entry-level cameras that have the touchscreens. Maybe someday we'll get touchscreens on the Pro cameras. All right, so take a look up here. If your camera and Speedlite appear on this list, the combination of them gives you access to the on-camera menu. If both of your units are in green, then you've got the latest generation of display technology, and you've got access. If you've got one of the green cameras, you've got access to the quick menu versus the text menu. But if you're shooting an older camera, like say the 5D2 with text menu, it's still completely usable. You just end up scrolling up and down the list to find the menu option that you want. Okay, now, with more recent models, the position of the menu system has been standardized. The hierarchy of the menu system has been standardized. But on earlier cameras, where the flash menu was, or whether it was called the Speedlite menu, depending upon whether the camera had a pop-up menu or not, it changed by model to model. So the best thing I can say for you today, because I certainly don't have all of these details ingrained in my memory, is to check the user manual of your camera. You are basically looking for either external speedlight control, or in the case of a camera that has a pop-up, it will start the menu and it will say flash control or flash functions. All right, either one of those. Here's my recommendation. Put it on your My Menu. That's a funny play on words, your My Menu. Put it on the My Menu option for your camera. This is a screen that allows you to select from your favorite camera functions. All right? So for me, on my cameras, external speedlight control is always the #1 thing on my menu. So bang, I can keep it right there. Why? Because up until recently, like the 7D Mark II, I think was the very first camera that maintained its position, every camera prior to it with a graphic or a text-based menu, if you were 2 or 3 options down in the menu system, and you tap the shutter button, and then you look at the menu again, you're way back up at the top of the menu. And at first I thought, oh boy, that's just a pain. But then I got used to saying, oh, okay, click, turn 2 notches, push the button, and I could jump in and out of the menu system super fast. So for me, this is one of the great reasons to shoot Canon Speedlites. All right, getting started with radio. Some of the fundamental ideas. We need to embrace the idea that wireless now comes in 2 flavors. Optical wireless and radio wireless. Prior to this radio business, Canon never distinguished wireless. It was just wireless. And then when they introduced the 600 EXRT and brought radio-enabled speedlight into the world, they had to kind of backpedal and say, oh yeah, that old system actually operates off of flashes of light. All right, so let's take a look at a couple of the fundamental concepts. We're not going deep into this, but you need to be able to say, okay, those kind of ways of thinking, those ways of operating relate to optical wireless, and all these other things relate to radio. If you don't have a radio speedlight, again, just put my name, Syl Arena, into the B&H channel on YouTube, and there'll be a whole list of talks that I've done here over the years, many of which focus exclusively on optical wireless techniques. So the first thing to know about optical wireless is that the flash tube is the transmitter. It is literally the light coming off the flash tube, an ultra-fast pulse of light. It's like super fast Morse code So if you block the head of the Speedlite with your hand, when it's set as an optical master, you block all the light coming out of it, the slaves will do nothing. So that transmitter is literally the flash tube. There are a number of cameras. Not every Canon camera with a pop-up can be an optical master, but many of them can. So if your camera is listed across the bottom of the screen, then you have a camera whose pop-up can be an optical master. That's a very convenient way to get into off-camera flash, because you get your first Speedlite, set it up as a slave, and you're off to the races. Now, in terms of the slave sensor, this is really important for optical shooters. It doesn't matter for radio. But the black panel on the front of the Speedlite, all right, the black panel is the slave sensor. That's important to remember, because this is where the slave units, the off-camera units, are receiving their instructions. And if for whatever reason this face is pointed away from the master, it's not going to receive the instructions. So we have an optical wireless, not in radio wireless, but again, I want you to understand the difference so you can appreciate radio perhaps even a little bit more. With optical wireless, we have to have line of sight. Literally, the sensor has to see the signal coming from the transmitter. Now in this shot, just a simple demo shot, I had outdoors in full sun where everybody said, oh, optical never worked. Outdoors in full sun, it just was blinded. It didn't work. Well, it worked all the time if you turned the body of the Speedlite so that the sensor was facing the camera, and then turned the head so that it was doing the lighting that you needed to do. All right, that simple little move of just turning that face, no matter where my subject is, the face of the Speedlites, the slave Speedlite, is going to be looking back at the camera. So optical wireless has been superseded now by radio wireless. All right? Radio wireless has the same kind of concepts. There's a master unit, and there are slave Speedlites. The master unit could be a Speedlite, could be a transmitter, and then the master is going to send the instructions to the slaves. Now, one of the great things about radio is that we no longer have to worry about line of sight. I could literally outside this room set up a light stand and put up a light and flash light through the blinds if I wanted to light up, if I wanted to make it look like there was a sunset and we had the shades pulled or whatever. We no longer have to have that clear visual path between transmitter and slave. So these radio masters can send a signal literally in any direction, and in fact they do. They just, when they fire, they send out a sphere of electromagnetic radiation, travels in all directions. So all of a sudden, the geometry of our shoots is much more liberated. I don't have to worry about, it used to be I always had to worry about having my Speedlites in front of the camera so they could see the pulse of light coming off my master, or I had to turn the head to send instructions to that Speedlite or that Speedlite, which meant then I couldn't have any over here if I turned the head of the master behind me off to one side. But with radio, I don't worry about any of that anymore. Radio slave, likewise. It can receive the radio instructions from any direction. The only real limiting factors are range. Now, Canon has a very conservative estimate in the user manual. I, on the other hand, being a person that says, oh, that's what they say, I wonder what I can really do, I've controlled Speedlites that were 450 feet away. Why? Just to see if I could, because honestly, a Speedlite that's 450 feet away is not of much value unless you have really long glass, and I don't like carrying really long glass. But it was fun to try, to see how far, can I change mode, can I change power, can I change whatever, and it all worked at that great distance, all right? I have, though, by the way, been on a location where we had the slaves outside windows. This was an old hacienda house in New Mexico. And it was a workshop environment, and I was fortunate enough to literally have like an electrical engineer as a student, because we couldn't get the speedlights afire when the window screens were closed. But if we opened the window screens, the speedlights would fire. And it was the craziest darn thing, because there's a speedlight. But as it turned out, this window screens were antique, literally. They were made of solid copper. And it created something called a Faraday antenna, that the window screen was basically blocking the signal. How obscure is that, right? This was an old adobe hacienda with 3-foot thick mud walls, and that's the only situation where I've had issues in real working distances where I couldn't get it to fire. So the Faraday antenna effect. But master and slave were no longer concerned about that optical line of sight. Now notice the subtlety of this message right here. You can fire your speedlights in radio, or you can fire your speedlights in optical. So the 600 series and the 430EX3 RT, those two groups, radio-enabled speedlights will work in optical, so they can work with all of your old legacy gear, or they can work in radio. Contrary to whatever way you want to phrase the question, the answer is always no. You cannot get a radio unit to talk to another radio unit that will then kindly translate those instructions and retransmit them out optically to other slaves. Okay, that's not part of the system. So you can get really creative. I've tried to phrase it every which way I could, and this is always the answer. It's radio or it's optical. We're not blending them. So the 600EXRT can be a solo speedlight, just a speedlight in your hot shoe that works alone. It can be that radio master, it can be a radio slave, optical master, optical slave. So 5 ways to use that speedlight. The new 430EX3 RT does not work as an optical master. I'm not crying. I'm not shedding any tears about that. 430s have never worked as optical masters. It does, as its predecessors do, it will work as an optical slave. So you can take your 580 series, your 550 series speedlights, you can take a 600, whatever, you can work it. But the great thing about this new unit is that it is now radio enabled at a great price point, $270. Now this is the STE3RT. There's another mouthful. All right. So this is the radio speedlight transmitter that Canon introduced with the 600EX RT. And it does one thing. It works as that radio master because it has no flash tube. In fact, it doesn't have an autofocus assist lamp on it either. So it's there for one reason. It has the exact same control that the back of a 600 has. It's just a horizontal format. So those 3 pieces of gear is the current universe. And I should say 4, because we now have that new 600EX RT2, but I'm still grouping those as one speedlight. So many people say, should I get a speedlight or should I get the transmitter? Well, you need at least one speedlight to create the flash. So really the question is, should my second device be a speedlight or the transmitter? And my answer prior to the 430 was, well, maybe the transmitter, unless you want to have on-camera flash or you want to have that redundancy. With the 430 now, 430EX3 RT, its price point is very similar to transmitter, and I'd rather have the 430 in my hot shoe. But some people like the low profile. All right, they like being able to look over the top of their camera and maintain communication with their subject. So it depends upon the circumstances under which you shoot. And again, this is looking down at the top of the transmitter, looking straight on at the back of the speedlight. Canon did this brilliantly in that they have one user interface between those two devices that's exactly the same. The new 430 has a different interface, which I love even more, and I don't mind that it's different. For those of you who haven't tried the new Speedlite, you can take a look. There's the 580EX2, the last generation of the 500 series, and you can see that its LCD is a little bit smaller. The buttons were hard-coded, meaning that the mode button could only be the mode button, and so on. We're going to go through an analysis of the buttons and dials in just a moment. That moment is now. So, in terms of the 600, there are a lot of things that we're already used to from earlier generations of Speedlites. And there's a couple of unique things, one of which sort of like, and the other which I've never really found a lot of utility. The one I sort of like is that there's a color filter sensor, these two little dots down here, all right? And what you get with this Speedlite is a little clear holder that has a gel or two gels that come with the system so that you can blend your flash in with the color of tungsten light. The new Speedlite forgoes the separate gels, and it actually just has the color, the amber color in the unit. But the Speedlite can tell when those filters are attached, all right? Now, if you can cut a blue gel and put it in the clear holder, the Speedlite is not going to know that you put a blue gel on. The remote release socket, because of the type of photography I do, is not a feature that I have found a lot of use for. But specifically, you can use that as a way to trigger off-camera cameras. All right, so you have a camera over there next to the lion's den, and you want to stand safely over here. You can get that camera to fire. The challenge, though, the shortcoming is, and for that type of purpose, I think it's great. But if you're a sports shooter and you're trying to capture 3 different camera angles, including a camera mounted behind the glass on the basketball hoop, the 3 cameras don't fire in sync. There's a little bit of phase shifting or something. So if that's an issue, look up my friend Peter Reed Miller, sports photographer extraordinaire, Canon Explorer of Light, and Peter can show you on his videos some techniques for doing that. All right, now on the back. User interface is so important to me. Why? Because like most of you, if I don't do something every week, it kind of just drifts away and I've got to re-educate myself. So if you're a shooter who shoots once a month or once a quarter, you might think about the user interface that your gear has so that you can say, how easy is it for me to get back in the saddle and use this device? So one of the things that's interesting about the 600 compared to previous generations of Speedlites is that the function buttons, those 4 buttons below the screen, change purpose. And we're going to go deep into that in a few slides. There's also the link light. And the link light tells us the status of the radio communication between several devices. The LCD on the Speedlite, unlike previous generations, is a dot matrix, meaning that they can form characters and symbols and icons on the fly. With the previous generations, multiple generations, all of the symbols and numbers and letters were hard baked into the LCD. So we would find, for instance, that the sync icon for high-speed sync is in one part of the screen, and for second curtain sync, it's in another part of the screen, and you have to remember all of those things. With this generation, with this technology, we've got the ability to just look in the same spot, and we're going to go through a lot of screenshots so you can get a taste of that. We have a dedicated mode button that is big, and that's going to become really important when we talk about some of the radio speed lighting features. And then there is a separate button to activate the wireless system. So the Canon engineers did a really, really nice job in introducing this new and improved user interface. And then all those other things are pretty standard for a Speedlite. Mode button. So on the 600, all right? On the 430, the mode button is going to be the place that you go. Now it's a different user interface as you're going to see. So we'll focus right now on the 600, and then we'll talk about the 430 and how to drive that. Mode. Mode is about who sets the power for your flash. Do you decide how much power the flash is going to fire at and dial that in? Do you have your camera do it automatically? Does your flash go off multiple times like a disco strobe? All right? So lots of different ways. One of the things that's a little bit hard to grasp, unless somebody just makes it overt, is this concept that when you have a master and off-camera slaves, once you activate a Speedlite as a slave, you no longer go to those slaves to make changes to power or to mode. You turn a Speedlite on as a slave, optical or radio, and it will default to ETTL mode, Canon's evaluative through the lens flash metering technology, automatic flash. But if you want to dial the power up or down, all you have to do is change the mode of your master to manual. And here's the key point, which is why I put it in green. The next time the master fires, instantaneously the slaves will change their mode and set their power level according to your instructions. So you make all the changes on the master, but you won't see those changes reflected on the slaves until this master transmit those, which is activated by pushing the shutter button. All right? We're going to take a quick detour and talk about how to select your flash mode. All right? I go much deeper into this, not only in the Speedliter's Handbook, but my other B&H videos. So we're hitting the highlights today. The number one thing to think about in terms of what flash mode you're in is whether the distance between your flash and your subject is changing or whether it's fixed. So you stop and think about it, like, what the heck does that mean, Syl? Well, if you're set up for a high school prom and you have your lights on stands, you have a little piece of tape on the floor, and you instruct each couple to come in and stand on the tape, even though the couples are changing, the distance between that piece of tape and your lights is not. That's a repeatable situation. And once you get your power set, you don't need to change it because now we've got a light gray dress or a light blue dress or a white dress or whatever. But if you're then at the prom and you're running up to a couple and saying smile, and then you turn your camera and shoot somebody that's 20 feet away, by just turning your camera, you've gone to a variable or dynamic situation. So if the subject to flash distance changes, all right, you want to be in ETTL. All right? This is the best mode. Why? The camera sends out a measuring flash, a pre-flash, 1/32 power. It evaluates the light that comes back in through the lens. It evaluates it both in terms of how much flash and where it's coming in from in the scene. It compares, that's the evaluative part, it compares those flash meter readings to ambient meter readings that it took literally a split second before it fired the pre-flash and after. It compares all of that data in real time, way faster than we can even explain it, calculates the proper flash power, tells the Speedlite to change its power. The Speedlite does that, and then the Speedlite fires when the shutter opens. All of that, from our perspective, literally instantaneously. So amazingly useful technology under the right circumstances, okay? Flash power can change from shot to shot. If you literally zoom in tight on me wearing this dark blue shirt, all right, the camera's going to meter it one way, and if I had a buddy here standing in a white shirt, and you zoomed out and got both of us and we were 50-50 in the frame, the camera would meter that scene differently, and you might see your flash power go up or down. And that drives some people crazy. So one of the things to know about success with ETTL flash is flash exposure compensation. And this is where I would normally slow things way down and give long-winded examples. But today, talking about radio speed lighting, I'm just going to point to flash exposure compensation. If you're an ETTL shooter, you need to know how to use FEC, flash exposure compensation, as a way to fine-tune your ETTL flash. You're going to impose your vision over the camera's calculations, because there are some instances where the camera sees it one way and you want it to be another. All right, moving on quickly. Manual flash power. If your subjective flash distance is fixed, like most of the location portraits that I do, it's a fixed situation. Subject standing there, I've got my lights on stands, and I'm working. I might be moving the camera around in a lot of different angles, but because my lights are on stands independent of my camera, their distance is not changing. So in that circumstance, once I find the right power level for my Speedlite, I don't have to change it. I can shoot verticals, horizontals, I can go in close, I can come out far. And because the distance between the lights and the subject is not changing, I want that consistent light from shot to shot to shot. Group mode. Group mode is one of the reasons to switch to radio speed lighting if you're a power shooter. We're going to talk about the details of group mode, but suffice it to say that the highlights are we've got 5 different slave groups. So we're now having to learn to use the word group in 2 different ways. One is a mode, and the other to refer to different slaves that are assigned to different purposes. So we've got more groups, but here's where it gets really interesting. We can turn those groups on and off independently of each other, and we can also have them work in different types of modes. So if you've got a light on a background, okay, that light doesn't need to go up and down because the subjective flash distance is fixed. And then you've got a ballerina who comes leaping through the scene, or a series of them, and sometimes they're close and sometimes they're far. That subjective flash distance is going to be variable for the lights that light them. You have 2 different modes of operation available. All right, multi-mode. The only time I've ever shot multi-mode is when I'm writing a book on speed lighting. Perfectly candid. Why? Because you can do multi-mode in your most cameras now more easily. All right, so enough said about that. Look at the Speedliter's Handbook if you want to know all the reasons why. External auto and external manual were brought out on the 580EX2, continued on in the 600 series. We don't find these 2 modes in the 430 series. You have to be a wedding shooter to really want to use this old school technology, but the wedding shooters who've told me that they love it, really, really, really love it for reasons that I don't want to take the time to explain today. So it's like multi-mode, sort of an esoteric mode. ETTL, manual, and most importantly, if you're shooting radio speed lighting group, are the modes that you want to know. So here's a shotgun of random bits about radio. We can have up to 16 devices, and that counts or includes the master, whether it's a transmitter or speed light. Why 16? Because the system literally keeps track of all of the individuals. With optical, the master would send out these flash pulses of light with no idea if anybody was out there. But with radio, all right, if I was smart, I did the second line, yes. All right, we've got 2-way communication between slaves and master. It's no longer a situation where the master just, kind of like a parent, shouts the instructions and doesn't really know if they were received. Now with radio, the slaves send a signal back to the master when they're recycled. Okay? Pretty amazing technology if you're a multi-light shooter to have the ability to say, oh, my C group is coming in last. I may need to go change the batteries on that or just shut it off and keep going. All right? Master can be set to beep. This is really lovely, okay? Why? Because if you've got multiple lights going, and let's say you're shooting a wedding reception and the music's really loud, okay, you can actually set it so that your master beeps when all the slaves have checked in, is ready to go. All right. Master can trigger off other cameras. I don't find this, as I've already articulated, to be incredibly useful, but some people, wildlife shooters who don't have time-sensitive issues, find it to be helpful. And conversely, there is a way, a pretty esoteric feature in my opinion, but there's a way to take a slave speedlight and use it to fire the master's camera. Now, how do we turn the system on and off, and how do we navigate through it? Fortunately now we have a dedicated wireless button. So this is the 600EX again. And the thing to know is that if you tap, 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 it's just circling through 5 choices on a menu. Non-wireless mode, radio master, radio slave, optical master, optical slave, and then after optical slave, you hit it one more time, it loops back up to non-wireless. So a simple way to think about this system is that if you don't know, like if you missed, I guess let's use this metaphor, if you missed the train station, you just keep riding the train, it's going to come right back around in 3 or 4 clicks, right? You don't try to go backwards, you just keep going forward and loop back around on top of it. If you are shooting, oh, excuse me, let me point this out real quick. So this is what I call the electronic lollipop. That's not Canon's term, that's my term. That's Syl's term. But this is the icon for radio, all right? And that's the icon, and has been the icon forever, for optical wireless. So notice that in both cases, those icons are in the upper right-hand corner of the LCD. Great, that icon's not jumping around its position, and it's important to understand the difference. If you don't have your reading glasses on, you can kind of look and say, well, is it mostly vertical, or is it mostly horizontal, or not there at all? All right, so optical radio, same spot on each of the screens. Here's another important distinction. Same location on the screen. Master or slave. So the word master appears when it's activated as a master. The word slave appears when it's activated as a slave. You noticed previously that when it was a slave, I had my screens, I'll go back so you can see it. I had my screens turned that kind of greenish orange versus the solid green. That is really handy as a way, just by looking at the color, depending on how you program your camera, and I'll show you where that's at. Personal function 4 says, hey, when this is a slave, make the screen orange or green, and then there's an offsetting function for master. So if you like to look at the orange most of the time, great, no worries. But I use that green and orange settings, so I don't even have to look for the word master or the word slave. I just look at the color and keep going, okay? Now, this is, and I'm gonna walk over here, this is basically the only difference. So if you say, oh, it's orange, but it's not firing, well, maybe you accidentally push the wireless button 1 too many times, or 2 too many times rather, and you have it set as an optical slave, which isn't going to work with your radio master. So just remember of the things that you're going to debug. If it's a slave and your system's not working, one of the things to check is to say, am I in radio or am I in optical mode? So here's something that you should make a note of. If you are only shooting radio, you can shut off the optical function. So that wireless button goes from non-wireless to radio master, radio slave, non-wireless. Okay? Most shooters who have all radio gear, that's what they do. Folks like me who teach workshops, or if you just shoot in mixed environments, we still go through all selections. Or let's say that you've bought your first radio-enabled Speedlite and you have 4 optical Speedlites. So for now, you just can deactivate the radio and go straight to optical. All right, so it's a small but important distinction. Link lamp. This is so helpful. There's 3 options. A red link lamp means that the master and slave are not talking to each other. A green link lamp means that they both are talking to each other. The yellow, or depending on, maybe you see it as orange, yellowish orange, that link lamp means that there are 2 masters, which is not a problem. It's an interesting idea, and I'll share it with you in a moment. So if you have a master and 2 slaves, and one of them, and you have a green light on your master, your intuition says, okay, I'm ready to shoot. But if you find that one of your speed lights fires and the other doesn't, you might just take a hike and go look at the back and see if that link light is red. And there'll be a few things coming up in the slide deck that you're going to check to determine why they may or may not be communicating. But that yellow link lamp means that there is an additional master on the system. So where might you have 2 photographers using the same set of lights? A wedding, for instance. So if you've got 4 lights set up around the corners of a dance floor, and you're working 2 edges of the dance floor, and your partner's working the other 2 edges, you don't have to have separate lights. Radio, and literally you can be shooting in ETTL, your partner can be shooting in manual, and the system will instantaneously make those changes back and forth. So that's a circumstance where you might have multiple masters. All right, so let's take a look at some of the things that you're going to need to do. And this was said because this will be up on the YouTube channel. Maybe you want to go back and play it over again, because I'm going to run through a whole bunch of screens. But I want you to see how the menu system changes. So with the 500, we had to basically memorize the positions of what each of those buttons did. But with the 600, we have the interactive labels, and you're going to see those change. So the menus will change based upon whether you are in non-wireless, radio wireless, or optical wireless. All right? So the first button on menu 1, zoom, custom functions, pretty easy. Flash exposure compensation is button number 2. I mentioned that when we talked about ETTL very briefly. This is a button you're going to need to become very familiar with. If you're shooting ETTL and you think the flash is too dim, hit the FEC button, that simple plus or minus button, a scale pops up, dial the FEC, the flash exposure compensation, the setting you think you need, hit set, and you're ready to go again. The third button, flash exposure bracketing, this is, in my opinion, not Canon's, but my opinion, a legacy from the film area that I have never, ever found a use for. Flash exposure bracketing in the film era was something that many photographers liked because you could set your camera to take 3 exposures and the flash power would be more than the camera thinks was appropriate, as metered and less, or however you wanted to set it up. But with digital technology, I just have not found that flash exposure bracketing is helpful. I've had some HDR shooters say, oh, there's this great reason. It's like, okay. But put that in the esoteric department, in my opinion. Now, the menu button. When you activate your camera in wireless mode, the right button is always the menu button. So if you don't see the option that you're looking for, hit the rightmost button and look at the next set of buttons that pop up and find that. You don't have to memorize where everything is. You just have to memorize as you can loop through. Now this button here, with that small little icon, master enabled and disabled. This is a really important concept for both radio and optical wireless. And the concept is this: when your master is enabled, it's going to send the instructions to the slaves, and when the shutter opens, it's going to fire a flash of light. When your Speedlite is set to master disabled, it's going to control the slaves, and when the shutter opens, it's going to stay dark. Now, sidebar to a sidebar, I guess, double sidebar. If you're shooting optical wireless, you're still going to see the master, a disabled master, fire light, because that's how the optical master sends the instructions to the slaves. But if you could use a high-speed camera, you could prove to yourself that when your shutters actually open, there's no more light coming from the master. With radio, the instructions go out invisibly by radio signals. And then if we want an enabled master, we want that master because we need fill flash coming right down the top of the lens. A good place to, it's perfectly legitimate use. The shot of my son Tony with the soccer shoes around his neck, I sent light right across the top of the lens and it filled the shadows. Not necessarily a good place for your key light. Why? Because it can flatten your subject. But for fill flash, it's a great, great location. So going back to it real quick, if you want master enabled or disabled, you're basically just going to push that button and look for the icon. And basically, it's the 3 fingers coming out of the Speedlight's head. But fortunately, with the text menu, you'll see the word enabled or disabled. Don't fall into the trap that I did years and years ago, somehow justifying to myself, oh, when the master is disabled, it's no longer in wireless mode. That's not what we're talking about at all, okay? All right. Longer format class, I'd go deep into the ideas behind ETTL ratios. Again, B&H channel, Syl Arena. You can find a video that I did maybe 3 years ago on those topics. But the idea is simply this. If you have Speedlite slaves that are assigned to different groups, let's say A and B and C, and your ratio is set to all, that means that they're going to fire at the same power, every one of them. If you have it set to A and B, and you have dialed in a ratio of, say, 2 to 1, your A light will fire at twice the power of your B light. And believe it or not, if you have a C light set up in that system, it won't fire, right? You have to have A, B, C to get that third group of control. I'll show you when we come to talk about the specifics of group mode, a much easier way. If you're an ETTL shooter who works routinely with multiple lights, group mode is a godsend because it's much easier to understand than multiple ratios, particularly if you have 3 groups. And again, the menu button advances us, so let's see what's here. Channel. Channel, similar to optical wireless, we have to have the master and the slaves all set to the same channel, although we do have an auto default. That's the way it comes out of the factory. The problem is, for me, that everyone's units come out of the factory in auto, so if I'm in a multi-shooter environment, I don't want to be in auto per se. It's not totally a problem because I'm going to talk about wireless ID in a moment. All right? But just know that your master and your slaves all either have to be on auto or they all have to be on the same channel 1 through 15. And that little circle shows you on the screen where that setting appears. New to radio speed lighting is the concept of a wireless ID. So we have 10,000 codes possible from 0000 all the way up to 9999. And just like the code that programs into your garage door opener so that your clicker won't open your next door neighbor's door, with radio speed lights, we have to have the same ID code in our master and in our slaves. So if your speed lights are on the same channel, but one of your slaves isn't firing, you need to go look for the ID button and make sure that the code is set properly, that they all match. So in that situation where I said, hey, 2 wedding shooters sharing speed lights, those 2 shooters, their master speed lights, and all the slaves are working on the same channel with the same wireless ID. All right? Why do we have this wonderful system? Well, it's a way, if we went to like the Speedliter's ball and there were 10,000 of us all on the same channel, nobody's going to control anybody else's lights. All right. Enough said about that. In my running around over the last 4 years with these radio-enabled Speedlites, other than that weird Faraday phenomenon on the wire screen windows at the old Hacienda in Santa Fe, I've never really had an issue getting my master and my slaves to communicate. But we live in a radio-infested world because these Speedlights operate on 2.4 gigahertz. 2.4 gigahertz, I researched it, the industrial and scientific and medical band. This is the band that your microwave oven pollutes when you bake your potato, because microwaves are 2.4 gigahertz. This is the band that your wireless microphone probably works on, your computer router, on and on and on and on. Lots of different things work in 2.4 gigahertz.
Wireless phones.
Wireless phones, TV controllers, on and on and on. Unless it's an infrared TV controller. But the point being this. If you go to shoot in a hospital, a factory, a laboratory, at a university, anywhere where there's just all this stuff going on, if there's a bunch of young people around, chances are you're a radio-infested world. You might want to hit the channel scanner, which is that third button, and that little spinning wheel is going to pop up for 30 seconds or so, and you get this grid. Because what that grid shows us, for instance, is that channel 7, the very channel that I happen to be operating on for this demonstration, was the weakest of all the 15 channels. Why? Because there was something else in that vicinity that was using channel 7. Okay, I'm going to be a good neighbor and I'll just jump over to channel 13, for instance, because that's full strength, or any of the others. Many shooters just leave their system in auto, and that's perfectly fine. This is something you'd, again, only pull out if there were challenges between master and slaves communicating reliably. And you said, hey, wait a minute, I bet there's a lot of radio frequency. All right, go to a convention, big convention, a trade show. There's all kinds of interference indoors going on. Same thing, menu 4. Is there anything interesting here? Yes, something really important on the very last menu, sync. Again, I'll defer to my previous videos for the deep, deep details, but sync is really important, particularly if you're shooting in bright sunlight, all right? And because it's so bright, we're going to take a quick detour and talk about the basics, but again, high-level concepts of high-speed sync. So this is one of the two options. The other option in wireless, first curtain, or what I just call normal sync. So here's a real-world situation. Here's my friend Diallo. He's an artist in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And Diallo and I are downtown next to the Youth Arts Center on a bright Santa Fe day. And I want to take his portrait in front of this wall mural. And so Diallo, like me, has deep-set eye sockets, and he gives me a great smile. And because I've backlit him to get that hair all aglow and separate him from the background and so on and so forth, it's not a very good shot. It's like, no problem. I've got this Speedlite in my bag. I'm going to take it out. I'm going to put it in the hot shoe. I'm going to turn it on, send a little puff of light straight down the top of the lens. It's Phil Flash. It's going to be great. All right? And it sound like anybody ever tried this? And you come up and you get this shot over here. And you basically, if you're a first-time or relatively new flash photographer, you might take the Speedlite out of the hot shoe very carefully, put it back in your bag and say, well, I'll try again next year. I hate flash photography because the flash always puts out too much light and I don't know how to control it. Well, here's the reality of what's happening. Yes, it is the fact that you put a flash in the hot shoe of your camera, but that light that we see in this frame is not coming from the flash, it's coming from the sun. Why is the camera capturing it? Because cameras are programmed when they sense, this is not a Canon thing, this is any brand. When a camera senses that there's a Speedlite in its hot shoe, when a Canon camera senses a Canon Speedlite, Nikon camera, Nikon Speedlite, so on and so forth, but not cross brands, that creates other problems. But when the camera senses that Speedlite's in the hot shoe, it's going to impose the sync speed rule. And what the sync speed rule says is that for any camera model, There's a maximum shutter speed that can be used with flash in normal sync mode. So on the left, out in the sun, I was at a 3200th of a second. I turn the Speedlite on the hot shoe, take a frame. I'm now at a 250th of a second. It's not the light from the flash tube that's overexposing this shot. It's the change in the shutter speed on the camera. The good news is this. It's really, really simple to fix. So here's a diagram, basically, why do we have the sync speed thing at all? Again, quickly, our shutters consist of 2 curtains. And at fast shutter speeds, the second curtain begins to close while the first curtain is still traveling. And at really fast shutter speeds, the gap between those 2 curtains looks like a slit flying across the sensor or across the film plane. So we need to fire the flash at a shutter speed where the first curtain's traveled all the way across and the second curtain has yet to close. And the very last shutter speed that your camera can do that at is what becomes the sync speed for that camera. So at a 250th of a second on most Canon DSLRs, unless it's a full sensor camera like the 5Ds, then that's a 200th of a second. But whatever it is for your camera, that first curtain is completely open, and there's a split second when we fire the flash, the entire sensor will have the opportunity to capture the flash. And then the second curtain closes and it's all good. With higher shutter speeds, the second curtain begins to close before the first curtain is fully done. All right? So here's the solution to the problem. Turn your Speedlite on and activate it in high-speed sync via that sync button that we were looking at just before we got off on the detour. Now I've got the shutter speed that I want to control the ambient light in the background, and I've got just a little puff of light coming from my on-camera flash. It's an easy-peasy snapshot. Why? Because I activated high-speed sync. Now, high-speed sync is a great gift. It's a great, useful tool, but there's no free lunch, as economists say. And in this case, the challenge is that high-speed sync consumes roughly 2.5 stops of power. That's what it takes to get the Speedlite to pulse really, really fast, which is what it does in high-speed sync. So if you're shooting in a situation where you just need a little breath of light, that 2.5 stop hit, if you're an ETTL, the camera's going to factor it in automatically. It's not going to be a problem. But if you're out there trying to literally shoot moonlight in the middle of the day and dim the scene with a super fast shutter speed and make all the background light go away, and you need a lot of flash to illuminate your subject, you might not have enough flash power coming out of your Speedlite. But high-speed sync for fill flash, outdoors, bright sunlight. You know, I do some community workshops from time to time, and the first thing I tell people is show up with all kinds of cameras. I trick them. It's like, okay, we're outdoors under full sun. Should we use a flash or not? And they, of course, say absolutely not, because there's sun everywhere. It's like, no, it's exactly the opposite of what you think. When there's sun everywhere, you should turn your flash on. And when the sun goes down, if you want natural-looking photographs, you should find a very steady place to put your camera and turn the flash off. But high-speed sync, all right. So right there on that button, that's an important place for it. I wish it was up on button or menu number 1, but that's okay. I activate it if I'm in a, you don't have to do it for every shot. You just activate it and you keep shooting through your shoot. All right, group mode. We're going to go through a similar kind of thing because group mode is an area where we get lots and lots of questions. So again, you must have a 2012 or newer camera model to access group mode. All right. If you have a 5D Mark II, the Speedlite, you can still set the Speedlite up in group mode, but when the camera fires, it's going to default back to ETTL. If you have a 2002 or newer camera model, group mode is available. You have to be in wireless. We're here to talk about wireless today. As I mentioned earlier, it gives you 5 slave groups. Okay, there's a lot of times when I only use 2 or 3, but it certainly is nice to have those options. Each group can be turned on or off individually. This, for me, particularly in trying to teach or to understand, take those set shots. If you're shooting portraits with a patient subject, turn your lights individually on and off so you can see what each one is doing or not doing, as the case may be. For each of the groups, you can have ETTL, you can have manual, you can have external auto. For me, the world is pretty much almost always in manual, sometimes in ETTL. I've never found a situation where I had to be in external auto, but my friends who shoot weddings who love it really are grateful for it. If you are an ETTL shooter, then shooting in group mode, I've got a slide on this, will give you a much easier way to use flash exposure compensation across multiple groups, all right? So how do we get to group mode? We first go to radio wireless, then we cycle through on the mode button, and if you're cycling through on the mode button and you're not finding GR in the upper left-hand corner, it's because you're not in radio. You have to be in radio. If you're an optical, group does not show up because group is not an option. A couple of heads going, okay, finally. Now we understand. All right, let's take a quick look. So we've got this zoom, we know about that. Flash exposure compensation. Here's an interesting thing about FEC and group. This FEC button is global. So here's the way I like to think about it. We have individual group flash exposure compensation. Let's say I've got a light over here and a light over here, and I want this light to be dimmer. I can use flash exposure compensation to make that adjustment. But then I look at it and say, well, you know what? The left to right balance between shadows and highlights is fine, but I need the whole thing to be brighter. So this FEC button is a global button, and it will, if you add plus flash exposure compensation, lift, without changing the balance right to left, it lifts that ratio or dims it, all right? Me, I shoot everything in manual just because I want to be a control freak, but there's people who love ETTL. All right, so just a reminder that it's global. And then, so if you have it dialed in, that's where it's going to show up on your screen. Here's the big tip for the ETTL shooters. With group mode, we get an individual flash exposure compensation for each of the 5 groups. You don't have to say, I want B to be brighter than A, so I'm going to change the ratio from 1:1 to 1:4, but maybe it's supposed to be 4:1. Some people find those ratios very hard. I'm not here to judge. I'm just here to say this is, for many people, much easier. You want the B group to be brighter, you add flash exposure compensation directly to the B group, and you don't worry about the other lines. Group mode is the only place in our system where we've got that direct control. Now, how do we get this control? Because this is an area that in group mode, it's a bit buggy. So the first thing is to remember we have group mode and we have slave groups or ID groups. So A and B and C. When we see on the menu here GR, that's our gateway to beginning to select a group. So the first thing we do is we're going to hit that GR button. And, oh my gosh, sorry, I'm jumping through here because I want to get la la la. Sing to yourselves while I jump forward. All right, here we go. So you hit the GR and you're going to see that group A reverses itself out. All right? So that is the screen's way of saying, hey, you're now controlling group A. Now I cropped tight on this shot so we don't have the little select wheel down below. But if you want to work group A, perfect. Hit the set button and you're going to then jump over to control the flash exposure compensation for group A. But if you want to work group B, you hit the GR button, group A highlights, you rock the select wheel down one click, and hit the set button, and you'll find when you rock the wheel one click that the B group reverses out. If you go another click, C group, and so on. So basically you are looking to select the group that you want to change, all right? There we go. So once we select a group that we want to change, in this case now, we see that we've got the first button becomes on, off. If I want to shut group A off, that's where I'm going to do it. If I want to change the mode of group A, so you notice between those two slides, group A jumped from ETTL to manual, all right? So we hit mode, and it's going to cycle basically from manual, it'll go to external auto, from external auto, it'll go to ETTL. Just keep hitting that mode button, and it will just loop around through the three options, all right? The A plus or minus. If you're an ETTL on this group, that's flash exposure compensation. Since I'm in manual mode, it's how I set my power. So I hit that button, the power scale illuminates. I use my select wheel on the Speedlite, or I can do all of this from the LCD of my camera as well, but we're learning to do it here on the Speedlite. And so I'm going to dial that power up or down, and then hit the set button, and off we go. Okay. So it's pretty intuitive. It seems a little cumbersome, but the things that you have to remember, you're going to get in group mode by first being in radio, and specifically you're doing all of this on the master, not on your slaves. You're going to set your slaves up with separate group ID numbers, and you'll then use the GR button, and again we have group IDs and group mode related, but they do two separate things. All right. So I just put these few slides in here as a reminder that then if you choose the B group, all of those buttons are specific to the B group. All right, let's look at the 430 really quick. We've got about 15 minutes, we'll ask for questions. All right, so here's the 430 EX3 RT, the one in the middle. The first thing I want you to notice, it's compact. It's about 2/3 the size of the 600. That's one of the reasons why I now like the 430 EX3 RT as an alternative to the transmitter. All right? If you're a pro shooter and you've got all 600s, the transmitter might just be fine. But if you're a pro shooter, you're doing all of these buttons and dials all the time, and you remember how to do it. If you're an intermittent shooter, then you might find this new screen interface. So let's take a look. What's missing on the 430 EX3 RT? Okay, what's missing is right in front of our eyes, there are no buttons under the LCD. When I got my hands on this for the first time, I'm not the kind of guy that, I may write the books, but I'm not the kind of guy that reads the owner's manual to start with, right? I'd like to think of it as an educated way of saying, I'm going to see how good the user interface is. I just don't like to read the manuals until I have to. So 430 EX3 RT lands at my house, I unpack it, I look at it and go, oh, this is interesting, there's no buttons. The buttons I love on the 600 are gone. Okay, well, let's see what they did here. What they did is they gave us an incredibly simplified menu system on an interactive LCD. And specifically, anytime, if you press the select button in the middle on the screen, you just press that button, you now have a quick menu that pops up on the LCD of the Speedlite. This is the part I love. I'll be perfectly candid. I was absolutely happy with the 600 until they brought the 430 out. And I said, I like this one even better. All right, why? You hit that one button, I'm now looking at the status of my entire system on the LCD of the Speedlite. Okay, so in this case, upper left-hand corner, it says that it's in manual mode. It says the wireless system is off. My zoom is at 35 millimeters. I've got first curtain sync selected, and my power is 128, as low as it's going to go. All right. So boom, boom, boom. If I paid attention to my sequencing, all right. Now in radio mode, same kinds of things. I'm in manual mode, or I'm in ETTL, or I'm in group. It's going to say that on the LCD. This tells me that I happen to be a radio master. Remember on the 600, it's not a big deal, but I looked in the upper right-hand corner for the icon, and then I looked a little bit down to the left to see the word master or slave. Here, those two icons are integrated into one cell. Zoom again. All right, pop quiz, master enabled, disabled. Are we all clear in our head as to what those two things mean? Okay, good. High-speed sync, flashbulb H. All right, so in this case, I've got my high-speed sync activated, flash exposure compensation, or my manual power setting, depending upon the mode. Channel, I happen to be an auto factory default to 0000. So if you're going to the Speedlighters party and other people are getting your flash to fire, it's probably because you're all in auto, quadruple 0. All right. So if I want to change, go back real quick, I want to change that ID. I just basically scroll around it until that cell reverses. I hit the set button. This is what pops up. I make the changes, I hit the set button, and I'm done. I don't have to scroll through 3 levels of menus to find that ID, all right? If you're an ETTL shooter, ratios and groups. Here, if you're a manual mode shooter, we don't necessarily call them ratios, but if you have an A and a B group, this is where you're going to set it up. If you've got 3 groups, you can do that. All right, let me back up. Now, as if all of that wasn't good enough, there's an even faster system for the 4 most commonly changed items. So the select wheel rocks. Literally, it tilts right and left, up and down. You thought I meant it was really cool, which it is. All right? So basically, if I tilt north, south, east, or west, never eat soggy waffles, I'm going to get a specific function. So let's see what happens. If I hit mode, literally just push on that word, the screen says, hey, do you want to be an ETTL or manual? Okay? Why just those two? Because I happen to be a non-wireless here. All right, so then I can rock right and left on the wheel to toggle between my options, and then hit that little set button in the middle, and I've made the change in about a half a second. Likewise, zoom. I want to change the zoom. I change my zoom settings all the time. Why? Because zoom for me is a way to create a smaller and smaller or wider and wider pool of light, all right, on your subject. So if I just want to light the face, I'm probably zooming as tight as I can go and turning the face of that Speedlite vertically, like this. Nothing in the rule book says it has to be like that. So I zoom it tight, I put it right here, and now I've got a tight pool of light on my subject's face, like that first shot of the cowboy that we saw at the beginning. So I hit zoom, and that screen pops up. I toggle right and left on the select wheel, just rock it right, rock it left, and it's options, and when I get to the one I want, I hit set, and I'm done. All right? So this is in ETTL flash exposure compensation, and I hit that, I go up or down. In this case, I've dialed in -2 stops of flash exposure compensation. I hit select wheel, no problem. If I'm in manual mode, then I don't see the FEC, I get the power scale, but the same thing, I can dial that power up or down, hit the select wheel, and then finally wireless. So to turn the system, you say, well, how does this whole thing exist without all those buttons we have on the 600? Easy, you want to turn the wireless on, you hit that little horizontal flashbulb icon, and you've got no wireless, radio master, radio slave, optical slave. Now see where it says individual slave? When I was writing the first edition of Speedlighter's Handbook, Rudy Winston, who's one of my tech gurus, at Canon told me about, and we didn't really have a word, that's why I stopped. Well, I'm going to tell you about this thing, we don't really have a name for it. So in the first edition of Speedlighter's Handbook, I think I called it, the freelance slave, all right? And then it was really interesting to see that Canon came out with this independent slave. This was a little known feature for optical slaves where it acts as a slave, but you're controlling the power on that unit individually. So that's what an individual slave is. It's not assigned to group A or B or C. It's in its own universe, and all it does as a slave is fire when everything else fires at the power setting you dialed in individually on that slave. So why I didn't think of individual slave escaped me. But anyway, I think it's a really nice description. So radio wireless, again, just setting the mode. It's incredibly intuitive. Same thing for slave. So if I activated this as a radio slave, and then I jump back, and did you see how the backlight on this changed colors? Here we're in green, here we're in orange, loosely speaking, green and orange. All right, so very, very helpful kind of features. Radio, optical, custom and personal functions. We haven't talked deeply about it. They're kind of boring until you've got the one specific feature you're trying to control. But the good news is for all of these interactive LCDs, in contrast to the old days when we had codes that would say CFN 0100. Okay. So now the systems not only tell us what the number is, but it gives us a little cryptic icon such as the contrast on the LCD. You don't necessarily need the user manual. So, which Speedlite to buy? Great question, I think, today's. There's $200 price difference between the 430EX3 RT and the 600EX RT. Not the new one, but the one whose price fortunately has come down because of the introduction of the new one. Okay, so up here it says $299 versus $499. I actually think it's probably closer to $299 versus $470 or something like that. All right, so let's see what we've got. 430EX3 has smaller size. Okay, it's got that quick menu system. It's 2/3 of a stop dimmer. So if you're a power shooter and you need that, you're shooting full power all the time on a 600 or on a 580, then that might be an issue. But for most of us, that 2/3 of a stop is not going to be a significant difference. We have power that goes from full power down to 128th. On previous generations of the 430s, it went down to 164th power. So, okay, a little bit more control, master slave as we've talked about. It's got a little bit narrower zoom, meaning that it zooms, or should I say wider zoom, it zooms to 105 versus 200. Kind of like the difference in power, not a huge deal killer. It rotates 180 degrees to the right, 150 degrees to the left. Okay, those 30 degrees way over there on my left-hand side, I'm not going to worry about that. The 600 and the 580s go 180 degrees both directions. Dome diffuser, but let's get down and look at the last one. So compact size, quick menu system, same power range, radio enabled, a little dome diffuser and CTO amber diffuser that are included in the kit now, and you save a bunch of money. I really like the 430, and Canon's not telling me to say that. I'm just flat calling. I was here in April, and I said the same thing, and the 430 was brand new. So I want to close on some basic ideas, and then we're going to open up for questions. A flash photo always starts with ambient light. This has nothing to do with radio versus optical, but everything to do with making good images. A flash photo always starts with ambient light. So here's a shot of my number 2 son, Vin. This was my son who was on the cover of the first edition of the Speedliter's Handbook. And on the left, you see basically an ambient-only shot, a natural light photograph. It's a cloudy day, high overcast, but nice soft light, but nice boring light as well. On the right, you see what I did with a mess of Speedlites, dimming the ambient, lighting Vin. So I use this as an example of how to think about and how to look at your flash photographs. So every flash photograph has a portion of it that is lit only with ambient light. Now, maybe that ambient light is pitch black, but one could argue it's still there. In this case, outdoors, there was a portion of the flash that didn't hit VIN. Well, you'd say it goes on and it hits the background, except the background was a half-mile away, so no light came back. All right? So there's the portion of the frame that is only lit with ambient light. If VIN was standing very close to a wall, then we'd say, well, a portion of the wall is also lit with the flash. But in this case, it's only VIN who's lit with the flash, and everything around VIN is ambient light. Why is this important to think about? Well, it's important to think about because we control the ambient light independently of the flash with Speedlites, and actually do the same kind of thing with strobes. And how do we do this? How do we control the manual or the ambient light first? Because Speedlites allow us to think about them and use them independently of each other. All right, shutter speed. This is a boring slide, but if you're taking photos of slides, take a photo of this slide. Shutter speed is the camera setting that allows us to control ambient light in a flash photograph. I wish I'd been around when I was trying to learn this stuff. Think about that one for a moment. All right, old joke of mine, but here's why, and I drew this to scale for you. When our Speedlights are on in full power, they're on for roughly an 800th of a second. As you dial the power down, they're on for less and less periods of time. So the longest a Speedlight is on, let's just say right now, is an 800th of a second. So if my shutter is open for a 60th of a second, that's the wide line on the left side of the screen, you can see that that 800th of a second flies through there no problem. When I shorten my shutter speed down to a 2/50th of a second, you think, oh, that's a lot, 2 stops. But that 800th of a second still flies through there with no limitation. So what I have when I change my shutter speed with flash photography is the ability to dial the ambient light up or down. In my case, it's mostly down. Make the backgrounds darker to force the viewer to think about my subject. So 25th of a second versus a 200th of a second. Same exact level of flash in both shots. Same modifier, same everything, all right? So the difference between those two images is the shutter speed's capturing of the background, all right? This is a little bit complicated in terms of which of the camera and flash settings do you choose to change for a certain purpose. I'm not gonna go through all of that, but I am gonna go back to the suggestion that you download my exposure guide, because in there on the last page is this chart, and it goes through those 4 settings, 3 of which are on your camera: aperture, shutter, ISO, then flash power, and depending upon what I wanna change, that determines the camera setting. Just like I gave you a taste, if I wanna make the ambient light dimmer, I'm going to change the shutter speed. Why not ISO? Because ISO affects both both ambient and flash. If I lower my ISO, it's going to make my flash appear dimmer, unless I'm shooting an ETTL, in which case the camera's gonna try to lift it. But if I want that ambient, and that's what this chart that you can get in that little download is. All right, so this is a great place to pause. Thank you again to Canon, and thanks to B&H for bringing me out, because it's really special to come all the way across the country to share what I know about speedlighting, and I'm grateful for the opportunity.
Whether you're a hobbyist or a professional, B&H has the answers to your questions. Experience a world of technology at our New York City Superstore. Connect with us online or give us a call. Our staff of experts is happy to help.